Rain had fallen earlier in the morning, leaving small puddles along the winding dirt path that snaked up the hillside. The tropical sun was almost oppressive as it broke through the clouds, sending steam rising from the damp earth. Orson braced himself against the strap of his travel worn leather satchel, adjusting it on his shoulder as he trudged through the mud. He had come a long way to research a series of articles on coffee cultivation, hoping to capture both the agricultural essence and the human stories behind one of the world's most beloved commodities. The air here was thick and warm, suffused with an undercurrent of rich, fertile scents. But there was also a translucent thread of savory sweetness drifting from somewhere further along the path. It was nearly noon, but Orson had no time to rest. Something told him that wonderful aroma was guiding him toward the heart of his story. He soon reached a sign painted in broad, careful strokes, Finca Sol y Sombra. Below the words, a stylized emblem showed a sun behind rolling hills. A gentle breeze rustled tall coffee shrubs, and the faint clatter of beans being sorted in woven baskets became audible as he drew closer. A small courtyard opened up before him, scattered with burlap sacks that bulged with freshly picked coffee cherries. Behind the courtyard stood a low-roofed house of white stucco walls. Both the shrubs and the color of the house swirled together in a kind of rustic, peaceful harmony that tugged at Orson's aesthetic sensibilities. For a moment, he simply paused, inhaling deeply, coffee fragrance mingled with hints of damp grass and warm stones. It felt like stepping into a lyrical reverie, one that made his writer's heart beat just a little faster. His first impression should have been one of purely professional interest, but something else stirred in him. There was an invitation, almost, in the stillness, an unspoken promise that the adventure would yield not just words, but an experience he would carry long after leaving. That illusion was broken by hurried footsteps echoing on the stone tiles of the courtyard. He saw a woman rushing forward, a couple of loose coffee cherries falling from her cupped hands. Her eyes widened the moment they locked onto his, and she hesitated, as though torn between the urgent task she had been pursuing and the curiosity of this unexpected visitor. Orson raised a hand in a polite greeting, hoping to convey an unassuming air. Without speaking, the woman gestured for him to step into the courtyard, setting aside the handful of coffee cherries into a basket on a wooden table. "Welcome," she said, wiping a stray strand of hair behind her ear. Tiny droplets of sweat glistened on her brow. "We don't receive many visitors here, especially not on foot." Her voice carried the melodic lilt of the region, but also a resonance that hinted at confidence and warmth. "Are you lost?" "No," Orson said, a little short of breath from his climb up the muddy path. "At least, I don't think so. I'm looking for a coffee farm where I can learn about bean cultivation and roasting techniques. I'm a traveling writer. Orson's the name. I write pieces for a publication that focuses on regional foods and flavors." He searched her face, uncertain if she'd welcome the intrusion. Her eyes shone with interest. "You've come to the right place. I'm Blanca, and this is my family's farm. We've been growing coffee here for 3 generations. She paused, eyeing his muddy shoes. "You must be exhausted. Come in. We have fresh coffee brewing." Orson followed her gratefully out of the sun. The lingering drizzle from earlier created a faint watercolor effect on the horizon beyond the home. Inside, the scents overwhelmed him in the most inviting way. Roasted beans, simmering brew, the oak panels of the walls, and a subtle note of cinnamon that blended into the background. He glanced around, taking in a compact kitchen and a cozy sitting area adorned with handmade fabrics. "I'll pour you a cup," Blanca offered, reaching for a ceramic mug. She was short in stature, but her presence filled the room with unmistakable vitality. Her hair fell in loose waves down her back. The sleeves of her blouse were rolled up to reveal strong, toned arms, evidence of a life spent working in the fields. He noticed her hands, calloused yet surprisingly elegant, as she filled a mug with dark liquid. "You roast your beans on site?" Orson asked, unable to mask his wonder as he took the first sip. A cascade of flavors lit up his palate: smoky, earthy, with an understated sweetness he hadn't encountered in coffee before. She nodded, offering a small smile. We do it ourselves, using traditional methods my father taught me. I'm combining some modern techniques, but mostly we preserve the old ways. There's an art to it, a kind of dance with timing and temperature. Would you like a tour? He nodded eagerly, profoundly grateful for her generosity. As they left the house, Blanca explained how a lifetime spent among coffee trees had shaped her perspective. The red cherries, pickers wading through the fields at dawn, the hum of the roaster late into the night, and the earthy taste of fresh brews in the morning. These were not just elements of her job, but the framework of her livelihood. I hope I'm not imposing, Orson ventured as they strolled among the coffee shrubs. From up close, he saw the delicate interplay of shade and sun that the sign outside had suggested. Finca soli sombres indeed. I'm genuinely fascinated by what you do, and maybe we can help each other. I'd love to write about this place accurately. Your story will shine through. Blanca remained silent for a few moments. The rustle of leaves in the breeze seemed to forge a bond between them in those seconds. Finally, she turned to him. I'd like that, she said softly. They spent the afternoon weaving through rows of shrubs. She instructed him on their growth cycles, when the cherries were the ripest, and how the region's microclimate, ample rainfall, moderate sunshine, and rich volcanic soil, brought out unique flavors. Orson hung on every word, sometimes scribbling notes in a small notepad, other times simply letting her voice wash over him. He couldn't recall the last time he'd felt so present in a conversation, so aware of the way each word unraveled a deeper dimension of the speaker's core. By the time dusk began to paint the sky in oranges and purples, they'd returned to the house. A vague hunger tugged at Orson, reminding him he'd had nothing but coffee the entire day. As if reading his mind, Blanca suggested dinner, an uncomplicated but hearty meal of beans, rice, fresh tomatoes, and plantains, served at a well-worn wooden table in the dim glow of a hanging lantern. They chatted about everything from the region's history to Orson's travels, their conversation drifting into moments of laughter that felt tender and electric all at once. I used to dream of traveling, Blanca confessed, brushing a stray crumb from the table. When I was little, my father would take me to the city on market days. I would see tourists from all over, hear them speak in so many languages, watch them look at everything with wide, amazed eyes. I wondered what it'd be like to leave this place, to see faraway lands. But I've never managed to tear myself away from these fields. She looked down thoughtfully. This farm, its coffee, its soul, it's all I've ever known. And I love it, but sometimes I want more. Orson took in the raw honesty of her words. I understand that feeling, he said quietly. I guess I took those dreams and ran, always searching for that elusive more. But though I've visited a dozen countries, it's not exactly the postcard perfect life people imagine. Constant motion can be lonely. Her eyes darted to his. But not tonight, she said softly, a shy smile creasing her lips. A pulse of energy rippled between them, as though they'd shared a silent secret. They lingered in that moment a little longer than two strangers normally would. Eventually, with a flutter of nerves dancing in Orson's stomach, he bid her good night. She led him to a small guest room with simple furnishings, a single bed and a worn wooden dresser. Despite its austerity, the space radiated warmth, as though carefully prepared for an unexpected friend. He settled onto the bed, listening to night insects chirp outside, hearing the gentle shuffle of Blanca's footsteps in an adjacent corridor. He could still smell coffee in the air, faint and comforting, lulling him into a deep, contented sleep. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Orson woke early each morning, joining Blanca and the farmhands in the fields as they inspected the coffee trees, made crucial pruning decisions, and picked only the ripest of the cherries. By afternoon, he would retreat to the main house to capture everything he learned in his notes. Blanca insisted he sit at the simple wooden desk near a wide window, where a cross breeze carried the tang of drying beans from the courtyard. On occasion, the light and angle of the sun were so perfect that his pen glided like magic across the page, the words practically writing themselves. Their conversations grew increasingly candid. Blanca opened up about her late father, whose absolute dedication to sustainable farming shaped her reverence for nature. Orson recounted an ill-fated romantic fling in Paris, a story sprinkled with comedic mishaps and heartbreak. With every shared glance, they realized how profoundly they valued understanding and connection. Meanwhile, the farm's daily routines gave Orson a deeper appreciation of coffee's journey. From spout to cup, he found himself rewiring his entire approach to writing, becoming less clinical in his descriptions and more emotionally invested. On the fourth day, clouds piled overhead, threatening to unleash a heavy downpour. Blanca decided they should roast a fresh batch of beans before the humidity soared. It changes the drying process if the moisture is too high, she explained when Orson asked why they couldn't wait. She led him into a separate wooden structure at the edge of the courtyard. Inside, burlap sacks of green coffee beans lined the walls, and in the center stood a roasting drum connected by elaborate metal piping to a chimney that protruded through the roof. She handed Orson a scoop. "We'll measure out the beans and pour them in carefully, but watch the temperature. That is the heart of it, time and temperature." He followed her instructions with a sense of reverence. He'd never seen coffee roasting up close. As the drum turned over the fire, a pungent yet intoxicating smell quickly spread throughout the small space. The beans crackled. Blanca's deep brown eyes glowed in the half-light of the furnace, and Orson felt intoxicated by more than just the coffee. He noticed the slight sheen of perspiration on her temples and the focused tension in her jaw. She turned to check a dial, then glanced back with a smile that somehow felt secretive and inviting all at once. "Don't let me distract you," he teased in a soft murmur, though he could barely tear his attention away from her. "Don't worry," she responded, gaze lingering on his a bit too long. "I'm used to the heat." A hush fell over them as they completed each step of the process in tandem. Each minute that passed turned the beans a deeper shade, intensifying the aromatic profile. They took turns stirring, monitoring the temperature, and working an auger that pushed the beans forward. The closeness in that small space forced them to brush shoulders now and then, an accidental intimacy that made the air crackle with a charge beyond the embers. When the roasting was done, Blanca slid open a hatch so the beans could spill into a cooling tray. A swirl of steam and smoke escaped, perfume-like. Orson was certain this was the most heady concoction he'd ever inhaled. Their eyes met over the swirling vapor. Blanca's lips parted slightly, and Orson felt a sudden pull, as if an invisible cord drew them together. They leaned in almost unconsciously until their foreheads nearly touched. Beneath the pungent aroma of roasted coffee, there was a radiating warmth from Blanca's presence. "Thank you for sharing this, your passion, your craft," he said huskily. "I'm realizing there's something special here that goes far beyond a good cup of coffee." Her cheeks colored. "It's not just the coffee," she whispered. "Sharing it with someone who sees what I see, it's different." Though it would have been so easy to close the distance, fate intervened. One of the farmhands burst in, apologizing awkwardly, to inform Blanca of a broken fence post near where the goats grazed. In an instant, the bubble of sweet tension burst. Blanca drew back, straightening her posture, and excused herself. Orson was left alone in the smoky, coffee-scented atmosphere, his blood thrumming with a mixture of unspoken longing and a hint of excitement. Over the days that followed, the connection between Blanca and Orson deepened in small, meaningful ways. They walked through the fields at twilight, brushing up against the leaves and inhaling the crisp odor of near-evening dew. They discussed random topics, favorite authors, childhood memories, personal regrets, each conversation layered with that unspoken awareness of growing affection. But for every blissful moment, Orson felt an uneasy tension churn in the pit of his stomach. The article he was set to write would eventually be completed, and then his work would call him elsewhere. He was a vagabond by trade, dedicated to traveling. How long could he stay? The only stable reference point in his life was the next bus, train, or plane to another location. One evening, he asked Blanca about the future of the farm, about expansion or modernization, but her response was measured. I'm content to make small improvements. The farm is my home. I never want to leave. Her words reverberated through him like a note of warning. One afternoon, Orson retreated to the guest room to finalize some of his drafts, wanting to shape them into an article that would do justice to the farm's magic. A gust of wind through the open window carried the smell of roasting coffee. He thought back to that near kiss, to the quiet, mesmerizing sense of belonging he'd felt sharing something so intimate. He set down his pen, rubbing at his forehead. Maybe it was foolish to think he could drop anchor here. Yet, as he stared at the half-filled notebook, the lines of text blurred. There was a thought he couldn't dispel. Not every journey had to lead onward. Some journeys led inward, to a place you never knew you could call home. That evening, Blanca invited him to sample a new roast. She'd arranged a candlelit table outside, under a pitched awning near the orchard. The clouds clustered overhead, but no rain fell. The subtle flicker of the candlelight revealed an edge of tension on her features. As they sipped, Orson noticed how she toyed with the rim of her cup, occasionally biting her lower lip. I have news, she finally said. I've been asked to showcase our coffee in a nearby town's festival. It's a small but prestigious event. We rarely get invited because we're so far off the beaten path. But apparently someone on the organizing committee read an online blog about our beans. That's great! Orson exclaimed, genuinely thrilled. She nodded. It could open new doors for this place. But they want me to do a roasting demonstration and a tasting. I'd have to be away from the farm for a couple of days next week, which is never an easy decision. Her eyes dipped to her cup. Would you like to come with me? Orson's heart leaped. I'd love to. If there's anything I can do to help, take notes, talk to festival goers, maybe even share a short reading. I'm eager. A faint smile graced her lips. If you read about this place the way you talk about it, people will drink in every word. Their eyes met, and the hush that followed was charged with a sense of possibility. By the time they finished their coffee, neither had asked the bigger question, what happens after a fleeting trip to the festival? But that unspoken question weighed in the warm night air. They set off at dawn a few days later in a battered truck, bouncing along uneven roads as the morning sun illuminated the rolling hills. The journey to town was filled with stolen glances and comfortable silences. Occasionally, Orson rested a hand near Blanca's on the gearshift, and each time they brushed fingers, it felt like a promise of more. After several hours' drive, they arrived at the festival grounds, a lively sprawl of booths selling local sweets, cheeses, artisan crafts, and of course, coffee. The mingling scents created a heady, tapestry-fried dough, melted sugar, brewing espresso. Their stall was modest, but Blanca's knowledge and quiet confidence soon drew onlookers. Orson watched her seamlessly explain the farming process, from seedling to harvest to a curious crowd. Her poised presence mesmerized him. After the demonstration, he stepped forward with his notebook, reading a short passage he'd composed that morning, capturing the spirit of Finca Sol y Sombras, sunlight and shadow, its devotion, its endless potential. Applause rang out when he finished. Blanca's gaze glimmered with pride. As the day drew to a close, festival attendees trickled away. Blanca started cleaning up, carefully packing her supplies and unsold coffee bag. Orson helped her gather the promotional pamphlets. A hush descended over the fairgrounds. A sense of relief mingled with triumph, and they wandered away from their booth, hand in hand. Nobody seemed to notice or mind as they slipped behind a row of tents. A sweet hush enveloped them. The festival's lanterns glowed softly, painting shifting patterns across the grass. Orson's heart pounded when Blanca's hand tightened in his. Hesitation flickered across her eyes, but longing prevailed. He couldn't wait any longer. This time, there was no broken fence or stray interruption. He leaned in, and their lips met in a gentle, lingering kiss. The world spun away, leaving only the soft brush of her mouth against his, the tingle racing along his spine, and the closeness that felt as though it might heal years of restlessness. When they finally drew apart, Blanca pressed her forehead against his, breathing softly. "You taste like coffee," she whispered, a tremor of laughter in her voice. He laughed, too, an unrestrained sound that felt as warm in his chest as the harvest sun. "Could be worse," he teased, "but I think it suits the occasion." Their surroundings faded into the background again as they kissed once more, with a deeper ardor this time, an acceptance that whatever blossomed between them was real, at least for this moment. Yet in that same moment, Orson sensed the faint tug of tension that came from his awareness that he was still, in essence, a traveler. Even as her arms wove around him, anchoring him to the quiet space behind those festival tents, part of him feared that this was an interlude rather than a destination. The ride back to the farm was done partly under the faint moonlight, partly under the shimmering dawn once more. Neither of them spoke much, but their hands remained linked over the gear shift, as though acknowledging that something had changed irreversibly. Back in the courtyard of Finca Solisombras, the routine tasks awaited them with relentless familiarity. The feeding of animals, the sorting of coffee cherries, the maintenance of the roaster. Yet every chore was tinged with the glow of shared affection. But soon, Orson received a message through an online schedule he half regretted checking. Another publication wanted an immediate piece on a new wave of coffee shops in a city halfway across the country. He'd secured the opportunity months before. If he accepted, he'd have to leave in 3 days. As he told Blanca this piece of news on the porch of the farmhouse, a sadness passed over her features. She nodded slowly, as though she'd expected no less. Their last evening together felt like a hush had settled over the farm. The fireflies danced in the fields, and the coffee trees whispered in the breeze. They sat on the porch steps, shoulders just touching, sipping a final cup of that sweet, smoky brew. "Will you come back?" she asked, her voice tremulous in the quiet night. He paused. "I'd like to. I'm not sure when." Blanca nodded, understanding the unspoken disclaimers that defined his life. "You know, the only thing that ever bothered me about traveling was the leaving part," she said, looking out toward the trees. "I suppose that doesn't change, even when you do find somewhere that feels like home." Orson gently set his mug down, turning to face her. He cupped her cheek with a hand, marveling at the softness beneath his fingertips. "You are so important to me. These last weeks have been more than just part of an article." She closed her eyes, resting her hand over his. "I know," she whispered, tears threatening to spill. They sat like that for a long time, neither moving, allowing the sounds of the night to lull them into a state of fragile acceptance. Finally, the moon climbed high, scattering pale light across the courtyard. With a heavy heart, Orson made his way inside. He didn't sleep much that night, overwhelmed by a swirling mix of regret and hope, longing and gratitude. The following morning arrived in a swirl of quiet preparations. A donkey cart was arranged to take Orson down the muddy path back to the main road, where a bus would come by. Blanca walked alongside him, occasionally pointing out a vine of morning glories or a low-slung branch, as if these were friends she was bidding goodbye in tandem with him. At the edge of the farm's boundary, they halted. "This is it?" Blanca murmured, tears glistening in her eyes. "Keep some coffee aside for me," Orson said with a shaky smile, "because I'll be back to taste it. You can count on that." They embraced tightly, each heartbeat seeming to say everything they left unsaid. Then he climbed onto the cart, turning back for one last glimpse of Blanca. She stood there, sun glinting in her hair, her posture both proud and heartbreakingly vulnerable at the same time. He held her gaze until a bend in the path carried him out of sight. In the weeks that followed, Orson wandered city streets, bustling with coffee houses, tasting espressos and cappuccinos. No matter how award-winning or artisanal they were, each sip brought memories of Blanca and the fields of Sol y Sombras. They had shared something more profound than fleeting attraction. He wasn't sure how or when, but he knew in his gut that he would find his way back. Back on her farm, Blanca poured a fresh cup each morning, quietly mulling over the tenderness that had so swiftly claimed her. Days blurred into the cycle of sowing, harvesting, and roasting, yet every step through the rows of green leaves and ripening cherries rekindled the memory of Orson's presence. In stolen moments, she recalled his laughter in the roasting shed, the sincerity in his eyes as he'd helped her measure out green beans, his gentle hands holding hers in the dim glow of the festival lanterns. And so it went, each of them enveloped in the rich aroma of possibilities of love and home, of roasted dreams that promised a new tomorrow. Time and distance had no power to diminish the essence of what they had brewed. It lingered, warm and persistent, a promise that the perfect blend of hearts could never be forgotten.